There are moments in life when we find ourselves questioning why certain people leave, why relationships break, or why opportunities slip through our fingers. It can be painful, confusing, and even frustrating to lose something or someone we thought was meant to stay. But what we often fail to understand in the moment is that God sees and hears things we do not. He knows what is said when we are not in the room. He hears the whispers, the hidden motives, and the true intentions of people's hearts. We as humans are limited in what we can perceive. We see what people choose to show us. We hear only what is spoken in our presence. We judge based on actions that are visible to us. But God operates beyond the surface. He searches the hearts of men. He discerns thoughts, motives, and the secret conversations that never reach our ears. There are people in our lives who may smile in front of us but speak against us when we are not around. There are individuals who pretend to support us, but deep down they harbor envy, jealousy, or ill intentions. God is not fooled by appearances. He does not need evidence or proof to know what is truly happening. While we might struggle to discern who is genuine and who is not, God has already seen it all, and in His love and mercy, He sometimes removes people from our lives to protect us from things we may never fully understand. That sudden breakup, that unexpected betrayal, that friendship that faded without explanation, these are not random events. They are orchestrated by a God who is always working for our good. When someone leaves, our natural response is to try and hold on. We want answers. We want to understand. We want to know what went wrong. But God is not obligated to reveal everything to us. He does not always explain why He does what He does, but He expects us to trust that His knowledge is complete. What He hears in the unseen, what He discerns in the silence, is enough reason for Him to act. And when He acts, it is always for our protection. It is easy to trust God when life makes sense, when things go according to our plans, but faith is truly tested when we must trust Him in moments of confusion, when we must accept loss without explanation, when we must believe that a closed door is a blessing even when it feels like a setback. Letting go is not always about weakness or failure. Sometimes it is about divine intervention. There are relationships we cling to because we see potential, but God sees danger. There are friendships we refuse to let go of because we feel comfortable, but God knows they are holding us back. There are people we fight to keep in our lives, not realizing that their presence is delaying the blessings that God wants to release. The longer we hold on to what God is trying to remove, the more we delay the fulfillment of His plan. God hears the things we do not, and that means He acts based on knowledge we do not have. When He removes someone, it is because He has already seen the road ahead. He knows where that relationship was leading. He knows the harm it could cause, the pain it could bring, the way it could derail our purpose. And so, in His wisdom and mercy, He steps in, even when we do not understand, even when we resist. We may never hear the conversations that God heard. We may never see the betrayal, the deception, or the hidden danger, but we do not need to. Trusting God means believing that He does not make mistakes, that He does not act without reason, that He never removes without a greater plan in place. When someone walks out of our lives, it is easy to feel rejected. The sudden loss of a relationship, the betrayal of a friend, or the unexpected end of an opportunity can leave us questioning our worth. We wonder if we were not good enough, if we did something wrong, if we should have tried harder to make things work. But what we fail to realize in the moment is that not every removal is a rejection. Sometimes it is divine protection. God sees what we cannot see. He knows the heart of every person, the hidden motives, the unspoken thoughts. While we may be focused on how much someone meant to us, God is looking at whether they were truly meant for us. There are people who enter our lives and seem like a blessing, but over time their presence becomes more of a burden. There are relationships that feel right at first but slowly start to drain our peace, our joy, and our purpose. Yet because we are attached, we ignore the warning signs. We justify behaviors that hurt us. We make excuses for those who repeatedly disappoint us. God in His mercy sometimes steps in to do what we are too afraid to do. He closes the door we were too hesitant to shut. He removes the person we were too attached to let go of. And in the moment it may feel like rejection, but in reality it is protection from something we may never fully understand. What looks like loss is often the prevention of a greater pain down the road. That friend who betrayed you, that person who walked away without explanation, that opportunity that slipped through your fingers, none of it caught God by surprise. He allowed it because He knew that keeping it would have done more harm than good. We often try to hold on to what God is trying to take away. We pray for restoration when God is trying to bring separation. We ask for another chance when God is saying it is time to move on. But what we fail to see is that keeping what is not meant for us will only delay what God has truly prepared. When we refuse to let go of what God has removed, we position ourselves outside of His will. We cling to what is familiar, not realizing that familiarity is not always a sign of purpose. Just because something feels comfortable does not mean it is good for us. God is not punishing you when He removes someone from your life. He is not depriving you of something good. He is saving you from something harmful. Sometimes the very thing we cry over is the very thing God is rescuing us from. If we could see what He sees, if we could hear what He hears, we would not question His decisions. We would thank Him for the doors He closed, for the people He exposed, for the opportunities that never came to pass. There is a reason why some relationships fall apart despite our best efforts. There is a reason why certain people distance themselves even when we try to hold them close. God is not in the business of taking things away for no reason. He is always working for our good, even when we do not understand. Sometimes the greatest form of protection comes in the form of loss. What we perceive as rejection is often God's way of removing distractions, preventing heartbreak, and clearing the way for something better. The pain of separation may feel unbearable at first, but what is unbearable now will make sense later. God does not allow anything to be taken away without purpose. The absence of something we once cherished can be the very thing that makes room for a greater blessing. What you thought was rejection was actually grace in disguise. There are people who come into our lives for a season, and we convince ourselves that they are meant to stay forever. We build connections, share experiences, and attach emotions to individuals who may not have been part of God's long-term plan for us. But when they leave, when the relationship fades, when the connection is severed, we struggle to accept it. We hold on to the memories, replay the moments, and question what went wrong. But the truth is, not everyone who enters our lives is meant to remain. Some people were only assigned to a chapter, not the whole story. God allows people to come into our lives for different reasons. Some are there to teach us a lesson, some are there to help us grow, and some are simply there to serve a temporary purpose. The problem arises when we try to make seasonal people permanent. We refuse to acknowledge that their role in our journey has ended, and we fight against the natural course of God's plan. Instead of releasing them, we cling to what was, hoping to force something that was never meant to last. But when God removes someone, He does not do it without reason. He is not taking away what is necessary. He is making room for something greater. We often hold on out of fear of being alone, fear of change, fear that we will never find someone else who understands us the way they did. But fear should never dictate our decisions. When we allow fear to control us, we end up holding on to things that are no longer aligned with God's purpose for us. We try to keep people in our lives simply because we are used to them being there, not because they are actually helping us grow. Some people were never meant to go where God is taking us, and keeping them around only delays the blessings that are ahead. God knows what is best for us even when we do not understand. He sees the road ahead, while we can only see what is right in front of us. The people who walked away, the friendships that ended, the relationships that did not work out, none of it was a mistake. Some people had to leave because their presence was no longer serving the purpose God intended for our lives. Holding on to them would have only held us back. It is not about whether they were good or bad people. It is about whether they were meant to be part of the journey God has set before us. It is painful to let go, especially when we have invested so much of ourselves into a person or relationship. We want to believe that what we had was strong enough to withstand the test of time. But when God removes someone, it is never to hurt us, it is to position us for something better. The struggle comes when we refuse to accept what God has already made clear. We replay the past, we search for closure, we beg for answers. But sometimes the only answer we need is the understanding that they were never meant to stay. When someone leaves, it is easy to think that we lost something valuable. But what if we looked at it differently? What if their departure was actually a gain? What if their exit was God's way of freeing us from something that would have only drained us in the future? What if, instead of mourning their absence, we trusted that their removal was a necessary step towards something greater? Some people were never meant to stay, and the sooner we accept that, the sooner we can walk boldly into the future that God has prepared. When God removes someone from our lives, our first instinct is often to chase after them. We want to understand why they left, what went wrong, and if there is anything we can do to bring them back. We replay conversations, overanalyze moments, and convince ourselves that if we had done something differently, they would still be here. But what we fail to realize is that when God removes someone, it is never by accident. Holding on to what He has already taken away will only hinder our growth and keep us stuck in a place we were never meant to stay. We struggle with letting go because we attach our sense of comfort and identity to people. We believe that certain relationships define us, that certain friendships validate us, and that losing someone means losing a part of ourselves. But when God separates us from people, it is because their role in our lives has ended. They have served their purpose, and keeping them around any longer would only delay the next season that God is trying to bring us into. Chasing after what God has removed is an act of resistance against His plan. It is like trying to reopen a door He has already shut, trying to hold on to something that is no longer aligned with His purpose for our lives. We pray for clarity, for direction, for blessings. Yet when God clears the path by removing distractions, we hesitate. We hold on to the past, convincing ourselves that we know better, that we can fix what God has already decided to change. God does not make mistakes. If someone walked away, if a relationship ended, if an opportunity was lost, there is a reason. And that reason is never to harm us, but to protect us from something we may not even see. Perhaps that person was leading us away from our purpose. Perhaps their presence in our lives was preventing us from stepping into something greater. Perhaps they were taking up space that God intended for someone else. We do not always get to know the why, but we are always called to trust that God's decisions are perfect. The longer we hold on to what God has removed, the more we delay our own growth. We cannot step into the future while clinging to the past. We cannot receive new blessings while our hands are still full of what was never meant to stay. There are times when God removes people not because they are bad, but because they are no longer part of where He is taking us. There are times when He allows separation not as a punishment, but as preparation for something better. But if we refuse to let go, if we keep chasing after what He has already cleared away, we risk missing the greater things He has in store. Letting go is not always easy. It requires faith. It requires trusting that what feels like loss is actually making room for something better. It requires believing that God knows what He is doing, even when we do not understand. There are relationships we cry over, friendships we mourn, and opportunities we wish had worked out. But what if we could see things from God's perspective? What if we could understand that His plan is always greater than our own? What if instead of chasing after what He has removed, we chose to trust Him completely? There is peace in surrender. There is freedom in releasing what was never meant to stay. The moment we stop chasing after what God has already removed is the moment we open ourselves up to the blessings He has been waiting to pour into our lives. But we cannot receive those blessings if we are too busy looking back, holding on to what is gone, and refusing to move forward. Trusting in God's plan is one of the hardest things to do when life feels uncertain. When people walk away, when relationships end, when doors close, it is natural to question why things are happening the way they are. The human heart longs for stability, for understanding, for things to go according to our expectations. But God's ways are higher than our ways, and His understanding is beyond what we can comprehend. What feels painful now may be a necessary step in bringing us to something far greater than we could have imagined. It is easy to trust God when everything is going well, when relationships are thriving, when opportunities are coming our way, when life feels good. It is effortless to say, "I believe God has a plan." But real faith is tested in the moments of uncertainty, in the seasons of loss, in the times when we cannot see the full picture, when someone we love walks away, when an opportunity we prayed for does not come through, when we are left standing in confusion. That is when trust is truly required. It is in those moments that we must choose to believe that God is still in control, even when nothing makes sense. Holding on to what is gone only prolongs our pain. We try to figure out why things ended, replaying conversations, wondering if we could have done something differently. We try to force situations to work out, believing that if we just try harder, we can change the outcome. But what we fail to see is that when God removes something, He does so with purpose. He does not take away without preparing something better. He does not allow loss without planning restoration. What may feel like an ending is often the beginning of something greater, something we cannot yet see. God's plan is not based on what is comfortable for us. It is based on what is best for us. We may not always agree with the way things unfold, but our limited perspective cannot compare to His infinite wisdom. When we resist His plan, when we try to hold on to people He is removing, we delay our own growth. We keep ourselves in situations that are no longer serving us, relationships that are no longer meant to be part of our journey. Sometimes the very thing we are fighting to keep is the very thing God is trying to free us from. There are times when God allows a person to leave because their presence is keeping us from stepping into the next level of our destiny. There are times when a door closes not because we are being punished, but because God is redirecting us to something better. If we only trust Him when things go our way, we will never experience the fullness of His blessings. Trust means believing even when we do not understand. It means surrendering control, letting go of what we thought should have been, and choosing to believe that God's plan is greater than our own. Faith is not about seeing the whole path. It is about taking the next step, even when the destination is unclear. It is about trusting that every loss, every disappointment, every unanswered question is leading us towards something better. The pain of separation, the confusion of change, the uncertainty of the unknown, none of it is wasted when God is in control. He is always working, always leading, always guiding us toward His perfect plan. But we cannot receive what He has in store if we are too focused on what we have lost. The key to peace is trusting that He knows what He is doing even when we do not. Healing from the loss of someone God has removed from our lives is not an easy process. It is one thing to know that God has a plan, to believe that He is working all things together for our good, but it is another thing to feel that truth when the pain of separation is still fresh. When someone we cared about is no longer part of our lives, it leaves an emptiness, a void that is difficult to ignore. We wonder why things happened the way they did, why we had to lose something we valued, why we have to walk forward without the person we thought would always be by our side. Pain has a way of making us question everything. We look back and analyze every detail, wondering if there was something we missed, if we should have fought harder, if things could have been different. The human heart clings to what is familiar, and when that familiarity is taken away, we feel lost. But the truth is, just because something was familiar does not mean it was meant to stay. Just because a person played an important role in our past does not mean they were destined to be part of our future. God does not remove people without purpose. He does not allow separation without reason, but healing requires a shift in focus. If we keep looking back, replaying memories, and dwelling on what is gone, we will never be able to move forward. Healing begins when we accept that some losses are actually gains in disguise. Healing begins when we stop asking why and start trusting that God knows best. It is not an easy process, but it is a necessary one. There are moments when the pain will resurface, when the absence of that person will feel overwhelming. In those moments, it is easy to fall into the trap of self-doubt. We start to believe that maybe we were the problem, that maybe we were not good enough, that maybe we should have done more to keep them in our lives. But that is not the truth. The truth is, if someone was meant to stay, nothing would have been able to separate them from us. If God allowed their removal, it is because their presence was no longer aligned with His plan for our lives. Healing also requires a willingness to release. We cannot hold on to bitterness, resentment, or regret. We cannot keep reliving the past, hoping for a different outcome. True healing comes when we surrender everything to God, the pain, the questions, the confusion, and allow Him to fill the empty spaces in our hearts. He is not just a God who removes, He is a God who restores. He is not just a God who closes doors, He is a God who opens new ones. But we cannot receive what He has for us if we are still holding on to what He took away. Some wounds take time to heal. Some losses will always leave a mark, but scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof of survival. What once hurt will one day become a testimony of God's faithfulness. The pain that seems unbearable today will one day be the reason we are stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the future. The people who left, the relationships that ended, the things that did not go as planned, none of it was wasted. Every loss, every disappointment, every closed door is part of a greater story that God is still writing. He is not finished yet, and His plans are always for our good.